Good.
Episode 2.
Yep. So we are back with another episode of our creative financing series. Last episode, we introduced you guys to Ep.2, which is a tool that is utilized in real estate, super underutilized, but it's been really popularized by people like Pace Morby and other real estate investors on YouTube and social media. So to sum up the last episode, if you missed it, Ep.2 is a tool that real estate investors use to basically be able to acquire a piece of property subject to the existing financing that is already in place with the current owner of that property. What that looks like is basically you went to the bank, you got a mortgage, you pay $1,200 a month, you've had it for 5 years, 10 years, whatever. I want to buy your property, but I want to take over the mortgage that you have and then structure the rest of the deal according to that. I don't have to go to the bank, use my credentials, all that stuff. It's an amazing tool, completely changed my life. So today, our episode, we want to dive into some of the deals that we've personally done and give you guys kind of a backstory of this was the situation of that deal. This is how we utilize Ep.2 to make the deal happen. And then our end goal with those and our exit strategies of how we made those properties profitable and how they made us money. So Cam, you're looking at getting your first property. You were super pumped up about Ep.2.
Yeah.
Told all your friends about it.
I sure did.
So,
Yep.
What I want to do is, like, as I go through this, any questions that you have, people listening or watching are probably going to have the same questions. So just stop me at anything that doesn't, add up or that we should dive a little bit deeper on.
All right.
Cool.
So hit me with your first one. You have Pierce.
Pierce. Okay. So Pierce Street was a property in Delphus, Ohio. The seller, as we touched on, I think a little bit in the first episode, seller was behind on his mortgage payments, was about to lose the property. He had tenants in there for a long time. He moved to Indiana. They ruined this house. It was a total gut job. The house had been listed on the market for 6 months. The seller was asking $60,000 for it because that's what he owed on his mortgage. $60,000 was more than investors would pay for it because there wasn't enough profit in them to fix and flip it or hold it as a rental or whatever with the large amount of renovation that it was going to require, which was $35,000-ish. Single family people, people wanting to purchase a house to live in, didn't want it because they didn't want to take on the huge renovation and all that stuff. So after it sat for a while, somebody actually referred the agent to me. I had went on a YouTube binge, figured out all this stuff, whatever. I started talking to people, putting in offers on properties, whatever. This agent was like, hey, you should talk to this guy. He's doing something with creative financing. I'm not sure what it is. But he asked me, because I was asking those agents, do you know of any properties that have sat on the market for a long time? Any properties that the sellers are facing foreclosure, yada, yada, yada. Those were some of the questions that I had learned to ask to try to find these deals.
And you asked a realtor?
Yeah, I had called just an agent that I knew and was like, hey, I'm getting into investing. I'd flipped one property a couple years before that, but I was like, I'm getting back into investing. Do you know anybody that has properties that are currently facing foreclosure or that have sat on the market for a long time and aren't moving because of either the price or that they need a bunch of renovations or whatever? They tell me about this property. I reach out to that agent. I asked to go see the house. I go see the house. I know going into it that I'm trying to do this as a Ep.2, but I just go into it hey, I'm an investor. I talk to her. I'm like, yeah, the price is too high because, I'm only going to sell it for $110,000, $115,000. You're asking $60,000. I got to put $30,000 to $35,000 into the renovation. That's not enough room for me to make money. Can you put me in contact with the seller? Let me try to work something out with him. So
real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of a gatekeeper was that argument, or not argument, but exchange with her? Because could you, if you didn't have that conversation, sorry, I'm not even talking to the mic. If you didn't even have that conversation, would she have passed you on? Or did you show your knowledge in the situation?
Most times the agent, especially if the property hasn't sat for a little while, unless you're dealing in commercial real estate, but with residential real estate, most of the time the agent isn't going to put you in contact with the seller because it's their job, right? That's what they're getting paid to do is bring qualified buyers to the table. They don't want you talking to a seller, wasting their time if you're not even a real prospect or whatever. So I kind of got through that by telling her, don't worry, like whatever we structure, I would make sure that you're going to get your commission however we structure this deal. Because I'm going to make sure I build that into however I put this deal together.
So you were still honoring
her commission that she was going to make, yeah.
Okay.
And when the property sat for a little while, it's going to be easier to get them because at that point, like they've spent money on marketing that house, time showing it, all that stuff. At that point, they're like, I just need this thing to move. Like, I'll do whatever it takes to try to facilitate the sale of this property. Mm-hmm. So that's why this was a really good one for my first one to starting off. And like those qualifying questions that I asked to find that deal, like were perfect for what it ended up being. So I end up meeting with the seller. Well, actually, I get on a phone call with him. I ask him, how much are you behind? Because they're facing a potential foreclosure. They had gotten offers for a short sale, which a short sale is just somebody coming in and saying, you're asking 60, you owe the bank 60, but I'll buy it for 50. Let's see if the bank was willing to accept 50. The bank turned down their short sales.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he's like at a point that it's either let it go to foreclosure or hopefully I come along.
So that was he was out. He had
yeah,
no more
there's
tricks
like
up his
no
sleeve.
more
Okay.
routes for him to take. I asked him, how much are you behind in payments? It was around, I think, like $3,500-ish, right? So he's behind $3,500 in payments starting off. That's important because that $3,500 is what's needed to stop the foreclosure process. The bank's only going to give the agent so much time to try to sell this property before they're like, dude, we're just foreclosing on it. It's not moving. We need our money. We're going to put it on the sheriff's auction, whatever happens. That $3,500 stops that foreclosure process because the bank just wants paid. They don't care who's paying them. They just want the payments caught up, right? So I know right off the bat by asking, how much are you behind? I can pay $3,500 and stop this foreclosure process, okay? Then I ask him, what's your monthly payment on the property currently? His monthly payment was, I think, $600 to $700, somewhere in there. So he's paying like $600 to $700 a month. Then I have to ask him, okay, do you know how much is still currently owed on your mortgage? He says, yeah, it's $60,000. That's why I'm asking 60 because I owe 60, right? So he still has $60,000 left owed. I tell him, what if we can work out some type of deal to where I take over the mortgage, right? I catch up your back payments, stop the foreclosure process. I take over that mortgage, and then I do whatever I'm going to do with the property. Whatever I do with it after that, it's none of your concern because the foreclosure is stopped, which keeps you from having to file bankruptcy, going through all of that. And on top of that, once I start taking over those payments, he's already found his other place that he's living in Indiana or whatever. So most people have to sell their house because they need that debt to income freed up to go buy the next place, right?
Yeah.
He's already in his new place. So he doesn't care about that mortgage sitting there. Because a big thing with subject 2 is even though you're taking over that mortgage, you're still not the person that's responsible to the bank to pay that mortgage. The seller still holds that mortgage in their name for however, whether you agreed for them to just hold it for 5 years and then you refinance them out, or that within 5 years you're going to sell the property, pay off the bank, they're out of the mortgage. But most of the times, like I had mentioned before, I want to hold that mortgage for as long as possible. So I want to structure deals to where you're willing to keep that mortgage on your, debt to income for the next 20 years, 25 years. And why that's not as big of a holdup as most people would think is you have to think as a regular real estate investor, when they go buy a rental property, right? They're using their debt to income. They go buy that rental property. For that first 2 years while that property seasons and the bank sees that this is not a debt to you, it's actually income, right? It goes out of being a liability. When you first buy it, just like your own personal house, it's a liability, right? Now, after that 2 years, somebody else is making the mortgage payment, your renter's paying it, jumps out of your liability column, and now it's an actual asset. It's producing cash for you. Same thing for them. Because essentially what it looks like to the bank is you have the mortgage, but you have a renter, even though I'm buying the property, you have a renter in place that's making the mortgage payment.
It still looks like an asset on paper.
Correct. Now, that's tricky because there's a lot of things as an investor that I'm going to structure on my end to make sure that I get all the tax benefits of having that property, the depreciation, yada, yada, yada. So it's not necessarily jumping into an asset for them, but it's not counted as a liability.
Okay.
It's an asset on my balance sheet, right?
Wow.
But it's now no longer a liability for them because they're not the ones making the payment. And they're able to show, after 2 years or whatever, hey, I'm not even the one making this payment. Somebody else is making the payment. Here's all the receipts for that, yada, yada, yada. To do that, which this we'll get into in the transacting episode of this, which will be our final kind of wrap up what sub 2 is. There's debt servicing companies that you want to use that basically when I make the payment, it goes to this middleman. He gets the receipts for it. He pays the bank so that my seller and I both have paper trail showing they're not the ones that are making the payment. I'm the one that's making the payment. And that helps them when they want to go to the bank and say, look, I'm not even responsible for this. Somebody else has been the one paying it. Take it out of my debt to income. It's no longer a liability for me, right?
Wow. Okay.
So the whole reason of saying that is because when you look at a regular investor, they're using their debt to income to buy that first rental property, right?
Yep.
They have to let it season. The banks see that it's not a liability, it's an asset. Then their debt to income's freed up. They go buy another property. Right. They do it over and over and over again, okay?
Yep.
For this guy, it's like, yeah, you're going to hold that mortgage, but you didn't go to bankruptcy. I stopped the foreclosure, all that stuff. And it's only going to show as a liability for a set amount of time. So even if I hold that mortgage that's in your name for 10 years, it's not like it's going to stop him for 10 years to go buy a new house and do all the things he wants to do with his life and utilize his debt, right? So I tell him, just so you know, this would require me taking over your mortgage, that $60,000 that you owe. I'll catch up the payments for $3,500, whatever. Now, he's like pumped because he just wants the foreclosure to stop because then he's looking at bankruptcy 5 to 7 years before he can go buy anything, start completely over, right? So
wow.
Once he's on board, he doesn't even understand all of the scope of what I'm going to do as far as the renovations and renting it out and all that stuff. He just knows I'm essentially going to be able to sell the house, the bank's going to be made whole, and I'm going to be out from under this freaking house. Once I have that figured out, then I go to the agent and I say, okay, hey, I have a deal that's going to work for them. I'm going to buy the house. I'm going to buy it subject to. I'm just going to pay you your commission. But usually I'm going to try to structure it to, can I pay you your commission once we flip this house or once we refinance this house or whatever? Even if I'm just renting it and it's cash flowing, if your commission on that $60,000 was $1,400, hey, can I pay you $500 a month and I'll pay you $2,000? Whatever I can do to make it as little money out of my pocket as possible. If I can let the renter or the flip or the Airbnb or whatever my exit strategy is with the house, if I can let that pay her commission, perfect. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to let $1,400 stop me from making the deal happen, right?
Right.
So I work out a deal with her on her commission. I think that one I just ended up paying her cash and just being like, here you go, you're paid, cool, you're out of the deal. Once she's out of the way, now all that happens is, without getting too detailed on the transacting of the paperwork and all that stuff, which we'll get into different episode, I get the property. Now on paper, I am the legal owner. There is a deed transfer, all of that stuff. Just like when you normally buy a property happens. I have a closing with the title company. I do everything like normal. When you look up that property, I'm now the owner of record, right? I go in, I get an investor that's willing to put in $35,000 at a set return, right? To do the renovation stuff. I do the renovations with using investors' money. Once we do the renovation for this specific property, we did like what's called a BRRR. BRRR is BRRR, stands for buy, renovate, refinance, buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. So we go in, we renovate the property. I end up refinancing out of this and I get the property reappraised. I actually ended up appraising for like 135 or something like that. We're able then to pull out 70% of whatever that property, I think that one was actually 75, but we were able to pull that back out as cash. So now if you take that 135,000, 75% of that, I get to pull it back out as cash. What happens is my new loan, when I refinanced, pays off his mortgage. So his bank's made whole. I get the rest of the money back. I pay my investor their money that they had in, plus whatever.
Which was?
Like 35,000.
What percent wise?
What the percent of return that I gave them. So when I first started off, my whole thinking was, I don't care what I have to do. I'll offer people 15, 20% on their money and only have like a 6-month agreement just to get the ball rolling, because then I knew I could build credibility with my investors. I could, prove that I can do this to them, blah, 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 blah.
That's fair.
And at the end of the day, I wasn't too worried about making the cash up front on the refinance, on the flip. I wanted to have an asset that was going to cash flow for me for a long time, right? So I think that deal was 15% is what I gave him on his money.
Wow.
It only ended up being like a 4-month deal too. So he got 15% on 4 months of holding his money, which is like crazy returns. But either way, so we get all the money back out. We refinance it. Our new mortgage payment was like, I think 8 and some change or something like that. And then we put a renter in there. The renter was paying $14.75 a month. So now I'm cash flowing, after I have to take out like my capital expenses that I'm going to have, like replacing my roof in 15, 20 years, setting aside money for vacancy and all those other things. I'm still cash flowing like $400-ish a month. So now every month I have no money into this deal out of my own pocket at all, because the only money that went in was investors' money. That's all been paid back out. The commission didn't come out of my pocket. Like all of that stuff was paid from other people's money, essentially. I now have an asset that's going to appreciate over time. The amount that I owe, what it's worth, the equity is going to grow and grow and grow. I'm going to cash flow $400 a month at least. And I have no money into that deal at all. Literally $0.
Yeah.
Okay, so that
That's
subject
insane.
to was what that is like a hybrid kind of a deal, because in that same scenario, I could have just went in and did like a basic renovation, right? Like I could have just got it rent ready. Probably did that for like $7-8 grand. Maybe I just use my own money then, right? Like maybe I just have $7 grand and I'm like, okay, this is a very cheap way for me to get this property for $7-8 grand. And then maybe I can't rent it for $14.75, but if I have his mortgage, it's only $600-700. Maybe I could still rent it for $1,200, right?
Sure.
I'm still spending $7-8 grand and I'm cash flowing $300-400 a month. So you could still use that as an exit strategy, because you could hold that mortgage and then just rent it out, which is what we've done with other properties. But that gives you an idea of like, once you have the property subject to, you have so many avenues because you own the house. You can literally do whatever you want with it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So then however people use houses to make money, you can do too. You can rent it, you can flip it, you can Airbnb it, you could, sell it on the land contract. There's a bunch of different things that you can do with it.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in. But it basically breaks down into two sections really, or 3. You have the contact, you have finding it, making contact. Then you have the actual subject to deal.
Right.
And then you have whether or not to include an investor.
Yeah, and the exit strategy.
Yeah.
How are you going to get this property to make money? Which we knew going into that property, the 2 options were flip it. So I could have just renovated that house, mind you. Like I could have just renovated it and then put it back on the market.
Yeah.
In that scenario, I sell it for $130,000, right, on the market. They take, let's say 10% between realtor fees, closing costs, all that stuff. So you're talking about knocking 13 grand off the top. So now you still have $117,000. Okay. That's after your closing costs, everything's paid. I had $60,000 that has to be paid to his bank. And then I have $35,000 that is the investor's money. Okay.
Yep.
Even if you paid them 20%, you're talking about $7,000 in interest, right? So that's 35 now becomes 42,000 that the investor gets paid. The bank gets their 60. That's $102,000. I still walk away with $15,000 in profit on a deal that I have no money into.
Yeah. Just a lot of time and mental effort, which
and if
I guess once you
that
learn, it's not that hard.
35,000, like it's not like that house I went in and did demo and I did some stuff that, like I didn't have to do. That $35,000 definitely was enough to just pay a contractor to go in and just do it. So it was a small house. Like I could have had nothing, no time, effort, blah, 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 if I had the contractor lined up and all that stuff. And I'm walking away with 15 grand, which $15,000 is not a huge profit on, you know, a house that has $95,000, $100,000 in it. If you had to spend the $100,000, I had to spend zero. So your returns are unlimited cash on cash return, because I have no cash in the deal.
But instead, so how much money do you think you've recouped from that? How long ago was?
That was 3.5, 4 years ago now, I think. That property actually ended up cash flowing. It cash flows like $700 a month total.
Oh my gosh.
Between like everything that property does now. So yeah, whatever that is, it's a good chunk.
It's got to be more than the initial sell to get 15.
Oh yeah, I made way more than I would have made just selling it. And now I have all the extra benefits, like because we have all, like, you know, businesses and all that stuff. Like we want depreciation on our taxes and stuff. We need those extra write-offs, so it helps there.
Right.
That house when my kid's
Collateral.
25, it'll be probably paid off. I can just go sell it, and he can go start his life with 150 grand in his bank.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Talk about building a legacy. That's a tactic right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
But
And it's no money in the deal. And that's a big thing with creative financing, is it's like it gives you the ability to use all these tools. You don't have to have, like, people think about real estate investing, they're like, well, I don't have $200,000 to throw around.
you don't have to have anything, I guess.
Dude, if you had 20 grand, honestly, if you had $20,000 that you could utilize to like help with some down payments and different like things like that, you could move some property like big time. Because, you know, if you're looking at, I only had $3,500 into this deal out of pocket. If I didn't bring my investor on or whatever, I at least got the property for $3,500, even if it's in disarray.
Right.
I could have left it how it was and just sold it on a land contract and been like, hey, give me $5,000 down and pay me, instead of $600-700 that he's paying for mortgage, pay me $1,000 a month and do nothing. Literally do nothing. I get all my $3,500 back plus $1,500 because they give me $5,000 down payment, and then just turn it into a land contract. Like, let them do the renovations because they're going to eventually own the house. Just sit in the middle. You got the mortgage as subject to, you got the land contract, you sold it as a land contract, you're just sitting in the middle making money.
Right.
Same thing that the bank does. You know what I mean? There's unlimited exit strategies. So that was Pierce specifically. That's how we got it, what it looked like, what we did with it, how we exited it.
Wow.
Yeah. It's some powerful, powerful stuff.
It's kind of interesting how you learn some of this stuff from Pierce Morby.
Pace.
Oh,
yeah.
it's Pace?
Pace,
Oh,
yeah.
my bad. And that's Pierce.
Oh, and then it's Pierce.
Yeah. I was like,
that would have been a pretty cool
yeah,
correlation, though.
That's quite a loop.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to think of, there's just so many. There's so many questions. I guess the first one I want to ask is, let's write out like a system, like a step-by-step process.
That somebody could maybe follow?
Yes. Yep.
So the very first thing for sure is understand how these tools work. Because if you understand how the tool works, then you know how to apply it. Right? Like if you don't know how to use a drill, it's not going to matter if you have a drill in your bag and then you run into a situation where you need a drill. You're not even going to know that that's what you need.
Sure.
That's the tool that you need for that situation. So my biggest thing would be learn, go on YouTube, type in subject to. What is subject to? There's a million videos on there. I don't even remember who said this or where I heard this, but somebody along the lines said, if you can look at the closing documents for a real estate transaction, so, you know, a purchase agreement, your subject to agreement, all of those documents that go to a closing table, look through those, and if there's words that you don't know, highlight them, look them up, figure out what the definition is of all these words that you don't know, and then go through that step by step and make sure that you understand what each step of that contract means, because that's all real estate is. It's just a flow of those contracts. So learn the contracts and the language and what everything is, because then you're going, also when you're talking to an agent or you're talking to a seller, you sound like you know what you're talking about, because you do.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're going to make people way more comfortable when you're talking about things that people aren't familiar with. If you're ultra familiar with them and you're super confident in talking about them, you're going to make people feel way more confident. Because if I go to a seller's house and I'm like, yeah, well, it's not, it doesn't hold to your debt to income and it goes out of your liabilities and then now it's an asset and you don't really understand what liabilities means. You don't really understand how debt to income ratios work.
Right.
And the seller hits you with a question and you're like, oh shit, I don't know. Like, that deal's going to fall apart, because they're going to be like, they're already trusting you, to do something creative that's out of the box.
Right.
You don't know what you're talking about.
So you got to know
it's
your
gonna
stuff.
Fall apart. Know your stuff. If you can just start with looking at real estate contracts, purchase agreements, subject to agreements, what a HUD statement is, how a HUD statement works, those 3 things, you will be set up to actually go look for the deal. That would be step 1. Learn how transacting real estate works. Step 2 would be decide what type of properties you want to go after. Having rentals is not a good solution for everybody. Like, long-term rentals, there's tons of people that are like, I hate rentals. I know investors that flip 10 to 15 properties a year that are like, screw rental properties. I don't want nothing to do with them. To me, I'm building long-term legacy, right? Is my goal. I want as many things in my asset column as I possibly can have. I'm trying to build a huge balance sheet, because for me, that's how I can grow my net worth. That's how things are going to get big, big, big over time. I'm not as worried about cash right now, because obviously we have like other means of income and different things. But if you're somebody that's like, I just need to make some money, dude. Like, I can't wait to make $400 a month and then stack 5 of those up so I'm making $2,000 a month. That's not going to change my life, right? If you just need to make money, then you're looking at, you need to do something that is like flips. So decide what type of properties you're going after, what your end game is with these properties. You're looking for quick cash, you're looking at flips. You're looking for long-term wealth and balance sheet type of deals. You're looking at Airbnbs, rental properties, things that you can sit in the middle, right? Land contracts, wraps, whatever, where you're going to hold the property long term. So if you're looking at flips, right, you're like, I need cash now. You want to go start asking realtors, what are the most beat up properties that you have? Who are the properties that are facing foreclosure? Because usually foreclosures, you're not looking at like nice properties, right?
Right.
Somebody has a really nice house, they're usually not facing foreclosure. That's not all the time, obviously, but generally. Start asking realtors what properties have sat on the market for a long time, because usually those need renovations. What are the most beat up, ugly properties that you can send my way that nobody else wants to deal with? And then door knocking, going and looking for houses that are distressed, right?
Wow.
Long
Door
term,
knocking.
yeah, door knocking, yeah. And it's,
I just can't imagine how that conversation would go.
Dude.
Would you just come up and just go, hey, is your house for sale? Is what you're standing in for sale?
Yeah.
Some people just go, you know what? I think it is.
Yeah. I mean, and a big thing is people are scared to do that. Like, people are even scared to get on the phone and call and be like, hey, I'm a real estate investor. I've been looking at properties in your area. I'm super interested in your house specifically. Are you open to talking to me about, maybe an offer on your property? If you just say, are you open to looking at an offer?
Sure.
I mean,
open for it.
I don't know many people that are going to be like, my house isn't for sale no matter what the price.
Right.
Like, most people are going to be like, I mean, I'm not selling, but like the right price, I'll sell. With creative financing, you can meet people above market price sometimes, and it makes sense for both parties. You don't obviously want to buy everything above market, but it's possible, and it's possible to get really good deals that are above market price. But anyways, yeah, so door knock, cold call, right? Get a list. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube too of like how once you get a list of addresses, you can run those through different softwares that'll give you the numbers of the people living there. At least the numbers that it thinks, right? And they're not 100% accurate, but big lists are usually, you can get a solid 60% of those that are accurate numbers that people will answer. And then if you're looking at long-term stuff, then you're just, for me, I'm just looking in good neighborhoods. I'm just looking in areas that I know I can put a solid renter in here. I can turn this into an Airbnb. Like, it has the potential to appreciate a lot because it's in a good area. The housing prices around there are going to probably keep climbing. And then I just like to talk to people that are either above or like above market price. Like, they are asking $120,000 for their house listed with an agent or something. And it's not moving because the agent's like, it's really only like $100,000 property. I don't have to beat them up on the price because I can structure something creative that gets them their money and I can sell cash flow. So that's how I look at long-term ones. But even though all those qualifying things for the beat up flip properties, because I have other tools to keep them long-term and I don't have to flip them, I look at those too.
I see.
You know what I mean? Because like that for like Pierce, that could have been a flip, but instead I refinanced it and kept it. We still have it.
Okay.
So learn, find the deal, and then the number one thing, just take action. Like, start making calls, start calling agents, start putting in offers on properties. Like, you don't have to have the money and have everything figured out. Call and be like, I'm an investor. It doesn't matter if you've never bought a house a day in your life. I'm an investor because you're looking to purchase real estate. You're just not looking to purchase it cash.
Right.
I'm an investor in your area. I'm looking to purchase a property. Here's my qualifying stuff. I think the rule of thumb is like for every 100 that you reach out to, expect to set like 10 appointments and expect to close 1. So if you're thinking you're just going to put this to work and you're going to like jump out and the very first one's going to be a deal, it's not going to happen. Like,
interesting.
It's just not going to happen. It's a numbers game. Like,
sure.
Find the properties. Now I can tell you our success rate is nowhere close to that. Like, we're definitely a lot higher than that. And I don't know I don't know if it's just our selling ability or whatever, or if we're just getting lucky and finding the right deals, or we're just only talking to people that we know are probably going to be a right fit. But I would say still we're only probably closing 30%, 25% of that we're actually giving a full pitch to of like, here's our offer, yada, yada, yada.
So you've already got them in the door? Like you've already like hit, hey, are you open to?
Yeah.
So they're already past that point?
Right.
Gotcha.
Like if I'm putting an offer in front of them, we're probably closing about 25 to 30% of those. But yeah, I guess I would say, I don't know, if I made 100 calls, I would probably expect to set probably 20 to 30 appointments, maybe put in 5 to 7 offers.
Wow.
Something like that.
Wow.
But yeah, the biggest thing, just like take action and just, you have enough information from YouTube to get in and like, I love the saying of like, cause chaos and then figure it out later. Like when you're in there and you're just, wheeling and dealing and trying to find the right thing, let that be the first step of get the deal and then go back and figure out the rest. You don't have to know every little nitty gritty of, okay, from step A to Z. You just need to know step A, B, C, and then figure out the rest.
So what are some of the what are some of the downfalls, I guess? Like what happens if you, I don't know.
I'm glad you brought that up. No, yeah. So big thing, when you're looking at subject 2, the biggest thing that you're going to probably hear on the internet or like naysayers of subject 2 is going to be people saying, well, what about the due on sale clause? So a due on sale clause is basically the bank, the mortgage company, on most mortgages has a clause in it that says if this property is transferred, all the balance of the mortgage is due. Right?
Oh, wow.
I've talked to and done, I've never, out of dozens of properties, I've never had somebody ask for a due on sale clause, like a bank. Pace Morby has done probably thousands at this point. I think he said he's dealt with it twice. Another investor that I talk to on a regular basis, he's probably done hundreds of properties. It's happened once. Usually when that happens, the bank's just going to say, hey, was this property transferred? Like, what's going on? And you're just basically saying, yeah, I acquired the property. We're the ones making the mortgage payment. Still going to be on time, just like normal, blah, blah, blah. It's just going to be coming from us instead of them. And they're going to say, oh, okay, cool. The bank does not want anything to do with that house. They just want you to make the mortgage payment. Like, why would they care? They just want the money. Yeah, why would they care? They don't, like, if you went into the bank and paid my mortgage payment tomorrow, they're not going to send me something back. Why is Cam making the payment? You know, they just want the money. So that's usually like the biggest downfall that you'll see. Another downfall would probably be, in my opinion, like people looking at, I can rent this for $1,200. The mortgage is only $800. I'm going to cash flow $400. They're not taking into account, you know, if you're keeping it, right, you're going to have tenants that tear it up, move out. That's cost. You're going to have hot water heaters that go out. You're going to have roofs that need replaced in 10, 15 years. You have to look at the top amount that I'm bringing in and then take off like 25, 30% of that. Of 10% goes towards vacancies when your house sits empty from Airbnb or a renter moves out, you don't find another renter. Take out money every month for capital expenses, roofs, stuff like that. People don't look at that. And they just think, oh, well, this guy said if I find a mortgage for $800 and I can rent it for $1,200, like I can just take over the mortgage and I'm gonna make $400 a month.
Right.
Look at your net, what you're gonna net from that property. I think that's a big thing that people miss in the beginning, is they're not looking at all the expenses that go into that type of stuff.
And again, your net isn't necessarily even the money that you bring in. That's just to cover the expenses of everything else.
That's just your cash flow.
Right.
That's just your cash flow.
Your net is plus one property.
Right.
You're playing Monopoly a little bit.
Essentially, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I will not take a property that doesn't cash flow.
Yeah.
It has to cash flow because obviously I don't want to be losing money every month. But honestly, outside of that, as far as subject 2 goes, there's legit not a lot of downfalls that I could tell you, to be honest.
That was one of the main questions that my buddies had when I showed them the first video, is that they were like, dude, there's got to be some catches. There's got to be.
Yeah.
I
mean, and I guess too, like explaining, being a good enough salesperson and like knowing the information well enough that you can explain this to somebody and then be comfortable with it.
So that seems to be where a lot of the emphasis resides. You just can't walk up and go, hey, you want a subject 2?
Yeah, I have never pitched subject 2. Now how I make offers is I always make 3 offers no matter what. I'm going to make them a cash offer. I'm going to make them a creative financing offer. And then I'm going to make them like, hey, I'm not the right buyer for you, but do you mind if I go try to find the right buyer and let me get a commission? I never actually want to do that. But to me, it lowers their guard of like, okay, he's not just in this for him. He's also willing to like, you know, just help me move this property and make a little bit of money.
That is kind of brilliant. So what you sweeten the pot for the creative financing or whatever you want to do?
I'm always pushing creative financing. But like now, thankfully, we're at the point that we have made cash deals and we've just bought in properties cash. Like we've built up, you know, cash over time that we can now really actually make the cash offer. But say that there's a $120,000 house. I know that at $120,000 creative financing, it's a good deal for me. I'm going to go there and I'm going to be like, hey, I could give you a $70,000 cash for this house. These are the reasons why. Because it's sat for a while. I got to do the renovations. I got to do this, blah, 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 blah. And then I'd tell them, I'm not in the business of like being the type of investor that comes here and beats you down and tells you what your property's worth. I want to come to your number, and I'm always willing to try to figure out how to get to your number if you can try to help me get to my terms, is usually how I structure it. And then when they're like, well, what type of terms do you think? I'm saying, okay, well, what if we could work out something to where I could do X, Y, and Z, you could keep A, B, and C, and everybody's happy. And then it's, okay, if you're interested in that, this is what that would look like. We would do this thing called subject 2 and blah, 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 blah. Then I'm getting into the details of it, right? I'm never being like, hey, do you want to sell your house but not get cash for it? Do you want to do this subject 2 first? You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm always making 3 offers. The building that we're sitting in, I made 3 offers on. I structured the exact same way. I made 3 offers. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's pretty cool.
And we went creative financing.
So, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to put myself in the moment. What did I say originally? That the sell was very big on this one.
Yeah.
So I guess that's something to kind of consider as well.
It is. And
It's not as babied as like the traditional way.
Right. And it's honestly a big, big part of it is if you're looking at this like, oh, this is some, black magic, this is some like gray area, blah, blah, blah. And then you're putting that off to the person that you're trying to sell to, it's not going to work.
Right.
When you realize that this is a legitimate legal way of doing real estate and there is nothing gray about it, and you fully understand it, you are going to pitch it with confidence and you're going to make the people comfortable with what's happening. And that's how you will sell subject to deals, because that's everything, is the confidence in them. And yeah, so without going in like super detail on the other deals, Westminster was a deal where dad passed away, house needed renovations, kids didn't want to have to deal with the renovations, ex-wife didn't want to have to deal with the renovations. Nobody wanted to keep paying for it. Nobody wanted to be a landlord and put a tenant in there and do all those things either. Somebody referred them to me and said, I don't know what this guy does, which is like a huge thing. Like anytime a realtor calls me, they're like, dude, somebody said that you do something. Like, I don't even know. Can you look at this deal and see if there's something you can do?
That's what people said when I first met you, too.
Really?
They're like, we don't really know what he does. His kitchens look great. So
yeah. So they call me and they're like, is there something that you can do to help us? Because creative financing, I tell people all the time, like, you are not just a real estate investor. You are literally in the business of solving people's problems, and you have all the tools to do it. Like,
I see.
It is not.
Well, that changes the perspective.
Oh yeah, you're a problem solver. You are looking at deals that don't make sense to other people and figuring out how can I make these make sense and solve their problem and my problem, which my problem is make money.
Because the way I've seen it up till now, and not like fully, but the way I've kind of pictured it was, in what way can we make this attractive to them?
Yeah, no.
That's not really the right.
I'm glad you said that, yeah, because maybe that's how I've kind of framed it, and that's not the case. It's literally like you're putting tools in the tool belt to be a problem solver, so that you can walk into any situation and be like, oh, these guys were offering you something stupid because of X, Y, and Z, and they only wanted to give you a low cash offer, or everybody else is telling you this house can't move and it's not going to work. I'm here to solve your problem. I have tools that will make this work. Here's the tools. But so they called me and they say, is there anything you can do to help us? I look at the mortgage. I say, okay, it's not that bad of a mortgage. As far as the payment goes, I think I could cash flow it rent-wise, but their interest payment was sick. It was like 14-something%. Dad had refinanced it like at a horrible time and whatever. So they were also in the process of potentially facing a foreclosure because they didn't want to keep making the payments to keep it out of foreclosure, right? Because they're like, we don't have the extra money to just pay for this house until we figure out what we want to do with it. So I did what's called a loan modification. Sounds fancy. All that is
tool?
It is. It's not like subject to or anything. All loan modification means is I called the bank and said, hey, I'm an investor. I'm trying to make this work. Can you do something with me to stop this foreclosure, not let it get to foreclosure? Let's figure out something with this loan payment, the interest rate. Can we work anything out to make this more feasible so that we can do something with this property and you guys can get paid?
So what, they refinance again, or they
they lowered our interest rate. The back payment that they were behind, they put it on the tail. They were behind, I think, 2. They put it on the tail end of the loan instead of making it due now. So say they had, 96 months left. They had 98 months left now. Little things that just help us keep cash in our pocket and not have to pay up front.
So they saw that you, like an investor stepped in, they saw that you had promised to get them their money.
Right.
And they worked with you.
Did a loan modification with the bank. It's not super hard to do. It just requires calling their bank and being like, can we figure something out here? But anyway, so we end up telling the family, we're going to do subject to. We have no idea if we're going to flip this house, whatever, but I know I can cash flow it. So I'm not telling them, we're only taking over this loan for 5 years or 1 year or 6 months. We're taking over this loan indefinitely, just so you know. They're like, that's fine. Mom doesn't need the ex-wife still on the loan. She doesn't need the debt to income freed up. Dad's obviously passed away. Nobody cares that this loan sits in mom's name for another 30 years. So we get the property. We start renovations on it. to just be a rental, just going to be a light, quick renovation. We're just going to rent it. Well, then comps come back of what this property would be worth if we did like a full renovation. So we end up doing a huge, like, put it like $110,000 into this house in a renovation, like top to bottom, high-end renovation, like turned out beautiful. We ended up flipping that house, and we actually ended up selling it. So that was one where we started with subject to, right? We got in there, we put the money into the renovation, used investor money, and then sold the property. So another scenario of things you could be looking for. This family, somebody passed away, had the loan, they didn't want to deal with it. Mom was still alive, the loan was in her name, yada, yada. It was a perfect tool for everybody. It solved their problem. They were like literally crying when we showed them the house after the renovation. They were like, oh my God, we always knew that it could look like this, but Dad always started the projects and never finished them, yada, yada, yada. So it literally solved their problem, made them so happy to see the house done, and we made good money. It was perfect solution.
Wow.
And then one other one was
Cole.
So lady wanted to move in with new boyfriend or husband or whatever it was. Already bought a house for herself. Didn't need the other house. Didn't want to be a landlord. Yada, yada, yada. We end up buying the house, doing a very, very small renovation. We buy the house subject to. This one was really cool because this one, she was trying to sell it on market. It wasn't moving because of the light cosmetic renovation that it needed. People just didn't want to do the updates and pay the price that she needed. So we ended up, she was like, dude, there's no way that I want to just do subject to though, because like I want some cash in my pocket. She wanted to like pay off credit cards and stuff. So I was like, what is the minimum amount that you're willing to take cash to make this worth it? She's like, well, if I sold it for what I'm asking for, I would put like close to 30 grand in my pocket. This is huge for people. I don't want to put 30 grand in somebody else's pocket. I'm usually not going to get that money back, right? Because it's not part of the renovations. It's like when I flip the house or whatever, like that money's just gone once I give it to somebody. The house, let's just say that she wanted $100,000. Instead of giving her $30,000 in cash down, I tell her, how about that $30,000 that you're looking to get? I give you $10,000 down, and the other $20,000 we pay you over time. Kind of like that other deal I was talking about in the first episode.
Wow.
Let me pay you the other $20,000 over time, and it'll help you. You know, you're not getting hit with a huge tax on extra 30 grand, blah, blah, blah. And then we come in, we renovated it. We ended up keeping it, and the renovation was so light that we didn't have to refinance it. We didn't have to do anything. We actually ended up working with a company that finds rentals for like people in rehabilitation and stuff. They end up renting it by the bedroom. We cash flow it. We didn't have to refinance it. We didn't have to do anything. We ended up putting like, I think $9 grand in renovations, but we got to keep her mortgage. We still have it. It's going to stay for 30 years or however long she has left on that loan. And we just renovated it, put a tenant in it, and moved on about our business.
You have two payments going out to that one, right? Which is the mortgage and then her
Correct.
pay.
But her pay was, I think, 3 years. She'll be done. So we're already cash flowing as it is, making the 2 payments. And that 3 years is up, and she's paid out, and she's out of the way. Now we're just cash flowing huge.
Right. That
But
was
we didn't
that
have
was
to
a
do
big
anything.
one too.
Yeah, we didn't have to do anything with it.
A lot of just reminded me. I don't know why I didn't remember, but a lot of my friends were saying, maybe it was parents. I'm not sure, but they were like, "What if we want paid now? Like if we sell our house now, I don't want $1,000,
Right.
about to sneeze, but like I don't want $1,000 every month for the next rest of, like till I die. I want it. If they sell their house, they want paid.
Right. How I look at it is, and this is why, creative financing isn't always going to be the solution for everybody's problem. Because some people just want to sell their house and they're like, I just want this $40,000 right now and that's it. I don't care about anything else. How I always look at it is, if I go to buy an investment property, the bank's going to usually ask me to put 20% down, right? If it's a $100,000 property, because it's an investment property, I'm not getting it for 3% down like a homeowner is. I'm going to probably have to put 20+% down. If it's a $100,000 property, that means 20 grand I got to put down if I go to the bank.
Right.
If I can get the property for anything less than 20,000 down and not have to use credentials and not have to tie up debt to income, I'll do it. Like if they want 10, 15,000 down, cool. And how I like to pitch it to people too is, you know, if you're looking to get 40 grand, I'm only offering you 10. Can we put the other amount on the purchase price? So say that you're only asking for 100,000 for your house. What if I buy it for 120?
Right.
Instead of whatever, right? And then we structure that over time. You have a balloon payment, for instance. Balloon payment means all the amount that's left owed to you is going to be due at this time. So say that I can structure a deal where I have a 7-year balloon payment, okay? Same scenario. Person wanted 100,000, and that $100,000 house they stood to make, let's call it 40,000. If they sold, they'd make 40,000. So say that I offer them, hey, how about I just give you 10? They get $10,000 to start off with, and we buy the house for 130,000.
Sure.
People are like, well, why does that matter? Like, you're still paying them the same amount, right? The difference is if you look at the fact that, let's say that I'm cash flowing $400 a month for the next 7 years, 7 times 12 is what? 84 months, right? 84 months. So I'm making $400 for 84 months. So now I've wiped out all of the money almost that I'm actually paying them with just my cash flow, which is money that came from other people. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like that's the difference. If I can spread it out and still make them happy with the amount that they're getting, but I can use the tenant's money, the Airbnb money, whatever it is, to pay that down, it's still not money out of my pocket.
Right.
Compared to going to the bank, put the money down, or paying it all up front. Because is that math right? 32, 33?
No, we got apples.
Yeah, no, that's right. 33,600 over 84 months. I'm cash flowing 33,600.
Yeah, I mean,
And
that's
the only thing out of my pocket, even if they ate up all
impressive.
my cash flow, because my cash flow, that net cash flow of $400 is after I'm setting money aside to cover my expenses and repairs and all that stuff. That $400 is just my cash flow. So even if they ate up all my cash flow, that other 30,000, I still had 3,600 bucks extra. So let's take that off that 10 grand that I initially paid up front. So I'm all in out of pocket. I've put in what, 6,400 bucks, all in, way less than the bank. And over that 7 years now, I've built equity in the property. I've gotten depreciation write-offs on my taxes. I've added to my balance sheet. I have a property that's going to be paid off in 25 years that I'm going to be able to sell for $200,000.
sure.
$225,000, whatever. So that's usually what I'll try to do. If there's somebody that is like, I want a big chunk now. Like, how about we put it on the purchase price? Or if somebody's like, well, if you're going to make me wait, 7 years to get paid, then I want a little bit of interest. I'm never going to bring up interest first, but people do that. They say, well, if I was going to make $40,000 selling it today, and you're going to make me wait for 5 years, then I want, 6% interest on that money. Cool.
That's fair.
No problem. I'm cool with building an interest as long as I can cash flow it.
Gotcha.
That's all I care about. Can I cash flow the property? Because I'm playing the long game. I know in 25 years, like the amount of assets that we've built up in net worth in 4 to 5 years using these, it takes regular investors decades. Like, and that is not a joke. Like, I've talked to traditional rental investors and stuff that, do it the traditional way.
Yeah.
And our balance sheets are not too far apart when you look at them being 10 to 15 years in and us being 4 to 5 years in. It helps
All
you.
because of the debt.
Yeah. I can buy 500 houses a year if I wanted to. And I'm just looking at, do they cash flow? And do they cash flow with a property manager managing them, me setting aside money for all of the expenses that they're going to have, and I'm still making money to where it's passive. I don't have to worry about a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah.
So I guess the last thing I'll ask for this episode is, let's say you weren't going to cash flow it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was a property you were thinking about living in.
Okay.
And I don't know where that would fall if your debt's already tied up, so you don't have a lot of space or something to buy a property for yourself or whatever.
Well, maybe like you bought your first house and now you've outgrown it and you need to find something bigger.
Sure.
But you can't afford the bigger house yet, and you just want to rent out your house and then find something new.
Right. So would the payment, let's say you have a payment, the typical breakdown I see is you have a payment to the owner or the original owner, right? And then also the mortgage being taken over.
Mm-hmm. Which usually you're going to have if you're looking at nice houses. Let me stress that. If you're looking at a nicer house that you can just move right into, you're usually going to be looking at a house that somebody has some equity in. So that's when you would have that scenario.
Right. So how much more painful is that payment rather than just doing it the traditional way? You know what I'm trying to say?
Do you have a... let me pull this up real quick. So this will give you a good idea of, say that, because essentially what you're asking is it worth it for me to, make a bigger payment and pay the seller and pay the bank, right? So if you were just going through the bank, you could maybe get it for $1,000 a month. But if you were having to pay the seller and that, you're paying $1,400 a month.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay, so the house is worth what the house is worth, right? So say that the house is worth $100,000. If you go to the bank and get the loan, you're going to buy the house for $100,000. You structure something creative with the owner, and they're still willing to take $100,000. You're still paying $100,000.
Sure.
Right? So here's the difference. Let's say that you went to the bank and you put your 3% down. So now you have a loan for $97,000 from the bank, okay? And let's just say that you're getting that at 8% interest right now. That means that your monthly payment, this is just your principal and interest, is going to be $711.75. This is where things get wild. These first years, when you're making that payment, the first year you're going to pay $7,700 in interest. You're only going to pay $810 off in principal. Now let's take that all the way down.
Is this that like ARC thing?
This is amortization. So this is the idea. This is how banks amortize mortgages. You start with whatever your loan amount is. You have 30 years, right? Interest is here, principal is here. As you pay, your payment is going a lot to interest, a minimal amount to principal. Over time, 15 years in, you're paying almost equal interest and principal. And then the last part is when you're actually building all that equity.
Yep.
Right? You're paying more principal than interest, which you can see that here. Year one, you're paying $7,700 in interest, only $800 is principal. That means if you make all those payments of $8,000 some odd dollars, at the end of that year, you still owe the bank $96,000 on a $97,000 loan.
Oh, geez.
Right?
Right.
So, and if you look down here, like year 30, you're only paying $350 in interest and you're paying $8,000 in principal. You're building all your equity in the second half of your loan. Okay. So you go to the bank, you get the loan $97,000 because you only put $3,000 down on a $100,000 house, right? Because you're just living it. You're doing it the regular route. So you're paying a bunch of interest. Let's look at this after, let's just say that we structured a creative deal over 5 years. Okay. So 5 years here. At the end of 5 years, doing the traditional route, you're still going to owe the bank $92,200. Let's just call it $92,000 even. This is at the end of 5 years. Okay? Mind you, you have made a payment of $711.75 over 5 years. That's 60 months. So you have paid $42,700. Let's just call that $43,000. Just for easy numbers, right? $43,000 that you've made payments, and you have only built $8,000 worth of equity in your house. If you structure that same deal to where, say that you're doing
I think I'm catching
$1,000. Yeah, say that you're paying $1,400 a month, right? Mm-hmm. You're paying $1,400 a month, and that $400 goes towards the owner, because instead of them making their 20 grand or 30 grand or whatever it is that they were trying to make up front, they're willing to take that over some time.
Yeah.
Okay. But you're like, isn't it scary to make the bigger payment? Like, why is it better to make the bigger payment? This is why. Because that $400 a month over that 5 years, 100% of that is paying down equity. The equity that they already have in the house, of that $30,000, $40,000, whatever it is, every dollar that you pay of that $400 is building equity, building equity. None of it's disappearing to interest.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying? So at the end of
Got
that, 5 years, depending on what their mortgage is, because you're taking over their mortgage, right? You're not getting a new mortgage, you're taking over their mortgage. Say that they're 10 years in, right? Say they had the same loan to start off with, but they're 10 years into that loan. So for the next 5 years, you're paying years 10 to 15. So this looks like about $12,000, the difference in equity, like the equity that you would build over that 5 years, about $12,000. And that's just in the mortgage. So that's just, did I lose you a little bit?
Just for a second.
Okay.
Just for a
So
second.
say that we're paying their mortgage from year 10 to year 15. Okay. We're not paying years 1 through 5 because they've already been there living there.
They've already done it.
So we're paying years 10 through 15. So now my payments, I'm paying $6,800 year 10 in interest and $1,660 in principal. Okay. So now let's just add these up real quick because then it'll make it easy for somebody listening. So add up 1,660,
Oh, got it.
1,800,
1,800,
1950,
1950.
2,100,
Okay.
2,300,
Okay.
and 2,500. Just spit those back to me real quick. 1,660,
1660, 1800, 1950, 2100, 2300, 2500.
okay. So, wow, I did some good math on the fly. That was 12,310. I'm not gonna lie.
Jeez.
I'm pretty happy with myself on that one. All right, so 12,000. So what I'm saying is that is over this 5 years. Get out of here. Over this 5 years, I've gained $12,000 in equity because the numbers we just added up are the amounts that are the amounts that are being applied to principal. Okay, so this is all equity. Now I've gained $12,000 in equity over that 5 years, making this same payment. Okay, compared to this 5 years, we got 1,100, 1,000, 1,000, 800, 800. So you're only talking about what, $3,500 that you built in equity going the other route over that same 5 year period, making the same payment.
Right.
We're just talking the $711 right now. On top of that, though, you have your $400 a month that's getting paid to them at 100% principal. So that's another 60 months. That's $24,000 that you have gained in equity. So now when you combine those two over that 5 year period, you're looking at $36,000 that you've gained in equity on your property, making a $1,400 payment, right?
Yeah.
Well, it wouldn't even be 14 because it'd be 400 over the 711. So like $1,100 payment.
Okay.
Because we're talking loan for loan.
Yep.
Right? Just $400 more going to the seller.
Track him.
$36,000 in equity compared to $3,500 in equity getting a new loan. You're literally even paying more monthly. So looking at that,
Man, it's such a ripoff.
Even if you say that you offered them $115,000 for the house instead of the $100,000, you're still walking away with $15,000 of equity compared to $3,500 in equity.
How is that even possible?
I'm hoping that makes a lot of sense to you, so that then it makes sense to people listening or watching.
It's slowly hitting me.
Yes, it is.
And just but it hits me first. Like, how did they get away with this?
Yeah, banks. Well,
Yeah.
I tell people all the time. I'm like, think about the totem pole. The bank is the top of the totem pole for a reason. Doing creative financing, your entire goal is, let me be the bank. Like, I get to figure out ways to be the bank. I get to figure out ways to make money on creating new loans for people, structuring creative deals. And I'm making, because when you sell me your house and you have a loan on it, and then I go get a loan and I pay your loan off with my new loan on it, the only people really making money are the banks.
Right.
They're the ones making all the money.
Right.
We're just the chumps jumping through all the hoops to get the money to go buy the house and do all the stuff so that they can just keep making more money. That's all that happens.
Goodness
They're the ones
gracious.
making money the whole time. But yeah, I'm glad that this is making sense to you because I know it seems very complex and we've dove really deep on stuff.
Many numbers
It
all
is.
over.
But if
New.
there's one takeaway from it is you don't have to play the bank's game anymore.
Yeah.
You don't have to play the bank's game. I don't have to go beg for money at a bank. I don't have to go jump through the hoops. I don't have to worry about, oh my God, I forgot to turn on the auto pay on my credit card and now I missed one payment. Now my credit dropped 100 freaking points. So I can't go get a loan for another 9 months.
Oh my God. You're subverting the credit system altogether.
Everything. Credentials don't even matter.
You don't apply to credit score necessarily in this regard.
I don't apply W-2. I don't care about a W-2. I know so many investors that literally keep their W-2 job because it helps them go get qualified for their loans because they have a consistent W-2 income. And banks love consistent W-2 income because it shows that you have the money coming in. I don't have to worry about none of that. Now, mind you, if I want to go get a 100-unit apartment building, all of this applies. If I'm looking at a 900 square foot house for myself, or I'm looking at a 100-unit apartment building, all of this applies. And to really wrap it up, keep in mind, I laid out that tool belt. We are talking about one still. We are still in the avenue of one tool belt out of 7, 8, 10 tools.
I'm telling you.
And they are all just as powerful as the next.
It is a lack of knowledge that holds us back in life.
Everybody. But why would they tell you this?
Right.
Why, like, not to get into conspiracies, which might have to be a different series in itself.
That's fine. Let's
but
do it.
Not to go down that rabbit hole or anything, but honestly, if you think about the way that America is set up, we are set up to, go to school, go to work a job, do all the things because that is what keeps this world turning.
Yeah.
Right? And what keeps banks making money is us not having this type of knowledge. Because if everybody had this knowledge, we wouldn't need the banks. We could make deals person to person. You know what I mean? Like, obviously somebody needed the bank to get the mortgage first, but all of us wouldn't need it. And all of us wouldn't have to feel like our only option is going the traditional route.
Got to go be a slave. Got to go give my freedom away to a bank. I can't believe it's almost like like literally the transportation of the message has never been tried. Like, because I have never heard this in my life. None of my friends have heard this in their life.
Yeah.
I brought this up to many other people, and they're like, it kind of sounds, not legit. It kind of sounds weird.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm just
blown
blown
up that
away.
HUD statement.
What?
People can't argue with a HUD statement. A HUD statement is a federally regulated document.
The law.
It's the law, bro. Like, pull that up. When you get somebody that's like, oh, I don't know, that seems weird. It's on a HUD statement, and it's right there. Like, it's right below the amount that you buy or that you borrow from the bank. It's right there, and it's not something new. It's been around for a very long time. It was definitely popularized by people like Pace Morby and some other investors, but it's also like part of the reason that I'm so excited to be talking about it and like us doing it or like bringing it to light essentially is because, like I told you, there's a ton of things that I've like dabbled in and had my hands in and all that stuff. But I think that you're right. The vehicle hasn't existed because those people are strictly talking to real estate investors.
Right.
They are strictly talking to people that are online looking for, I want to be a real estate investor. How can I do that with little to no money? Yada, yada, yada. Or that have heard the terms creative financing and real estate and put them together and then search them.
Right.
I'm not a real estate investor. Like, that's not my job title. That's not what I do. I'm in the business of building legacies, building wealth, changing the path of my family and the people around me, and trying to arm as many people with the knowledge that I'm, learning and still learning, and putting it in that vehicle of, this isn't to make you a real estate investor. This is to change your life and let you know that you don't have to play the game that everybody else is playing, that you can teach your kids.
It's one of the strongest tools.
The stuff that they don't want taught. Yeah, it's
getting
huge.
away from the bank.
It's huge. And now, mind you, I don't want to say we don't use banks. Like, we still use banks. We used banks for refinances. We used like an investor-only bank for refinancing. They're not as worried about the credentials. They're looking at the property itself and does it cash flow, whatever. But we still use banks. Like, we're working with State Bank right now for, funding with Easy and all that stuff. But it's just that I don't have to.
Right.
Like, now I have the choice compared to most people feel like they have to go that route.
Well, that's unbelievable. And so next episode, we're going to dive into...
Matthew McConaughey says, like, saying that anything is unbelievable is, like, ridiculous.
I do like Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
That's not a bad...
Just because he's like, when you say that it's, like, unbelievable, he's like, no, it's pretty believable. He's like, unbelievable means that it's, like, very detailed
That's
dust.
true.
It's not real. Like, no, this shit's real.
What's unbelievable is my...
No, I know
right
exactly
now,
what you mean, though. And I agree. Like, I was in the same boat. I was mind-blowing. And I was chomping at the bit like, oh, my God, I can't wait to put this to work. So hopefully some of these people listening are feeling the same way.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, there's something to this. Let me dive deeper.
So...
because of all the things that we want to cover too, Cam, it's like we want to go deep on some stuff, but it's like there's so much that goes into what we're wanting to do because our goal, right, is to change lives.
Right.
Like help people build legacies that change lives, their lives and the people coming after them's lives. There's so much that goes into that we can't spend hours and hours of diving deep into these deals and this is all the steps and blah, blah, blah. But hopefully it gives somebody at least that spark to be like, okay, I need to go learn more about this.
There are options at least.
Yeah. For sure.
Okay, next episode. Episode 3.
Yeah,
is
transacting.
Yeah.
Which that's going to be a probably a more dry kind of episode because it's just, the nitty gritty details of how to file the paperwork, who to talk to, what title companies to use, what the title companies are going to ask you, the things that you need to have lined up and in place to actually get this to the finish line.
But an important one
very,
if you want to do it.
Very. Because you can definitely trip and fall right at the end of a deal like this.
Okay.
Sign us off. Yeah?
Cool.
Good?
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, that wraps up episode 2 of Creative Financing. So specifically subject 2, what deals look like. We got a little bit sidetracked, but I think that it was all useful, honestly. And we keep saying this, man, but our goal here is to seriously arm the people watching and listening to this stuff with all the information that I have, with the people that sit across from me have, because that is the way that we are going to truly build legacies for ourselves and the people that come after us. So please, if you guys are watching this content, if you're listening to it, it is doing wonders for us to see the following grow, to see subscriber counts go up. And we want to get this message out to as many people as possible. And we can't do that without you guys liking, commenting, subscribing, doing all the stuff that you guys are doing. So we really appreciate you guys. Please keep that up. Stay tuned we have a bunch of different series coming of different topics that we want to cover. And we can't wait to put that stuff out to you guys. So as always, get out there and make your last name mean something.